Chapter 9. The room was filled with spectators when Andrew stepped to the front of the platform and introduced himself. I know most of you have heard about the work of the Children's Aid Society and the Placing Out program that was organized 60 years ago by Charles Loring Brace, he said. And I know you're eager to meet the children, so I'll begin the introductions right away. He turned and offered a reassuring smile to the children. I'm going to ask each of you to stand so as I call out your name and age. We want these folks to know who you are. He began with the children in the front row, just as Francis was deciding whether it was better to go through the introduction first and get it over with, or have time to prepare Andrew to reach the Kellys. Megan Eileen Kelly, 12 years old. Megan almost didn't make it. Her legs wobbled just before she plopped back on her chair. Frances reached out to touch her sister, but suddenly Frances Martin Kelly boomed in her ears, and with Petey still in her arms, squirming to clutch her tightly around the neck, she stumbled to her feet. Francis is 13, Andrew said, and he's holding his little brother Peter John Kelly, who's 6 years of age. As hundreds of eyes examined her, Frances felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. Her stomach lurched. If she didn't sit down fast, she was going to be sick. No, she wouldn't let herself. She took a deep breath and dropped to a chair, grateful that Andrew had called Peg's name. Peg seemed more curious than frightened, studying the people in the audience as intently as they were studying her, and Danny jumped out with his chin and head held high. It seemed nothing could keep Danny down, but Mike wasn't the jaunty, confident boy she knew so well. As Andrew announced Michael Patrick Kelly, almost 12 years old, Michael barely managed to slide from his chair. He hung back, his shoulders slumped as the audience examined him. Frances longed to jump up and hug him and reassure him that everything would be all right, but she knew no more than any of the others if that were true. Oh, Ma, she thought furiously, do you have any idea what would happen to us when you sent us here, when you betrayed us? When the introductions finally ended, and Catherine stayed on the platform with the children, but Andrew jumped to the floor of the room. People came to talk to him, and Frances could see as they pointed to one child or another. Husband and wives were deep in discussion all around the room. Even Mr. Crandon had come, and Frances watched for a while as he moved from group to group, leaning close to whisper. She realized in horror that each couple to whom he spoke would immediately dart a glance toward Mike. Andrew and Catherine were too busy answering questions to notice Mr. Crandon. If he were telling people that Mike had been a copper stealer, it would be very hard for Mike to find a home. Frances searched for the face in the crowd. There had to be a good man or woman here who would ignore what Mr. Crandon said, who would want Mike because they could see what a fine son he could be. Frances hoped so with all her heart. Frances watched a large blond man with a small, frail-looking wife spoke to Andrew, the wife clasping Andrew's arm in eagerness. Andrew nodded, smiled, and led them to the platform directly in front of Danny and Peg. Immediately after introductions were made, Mr. Alfred Swenson asked Danny, do you think that small sister sitting next to you would be willing for the two of you to go with me and my wife? Mrs. Swenson's smile was so bright and gentle, her face glowed. Please, she said, and held out a hand toward Peg. White terror showed in the pupils of Danny's eyes, and the words rushed out in a stammer as he groped toward Mike. Sir, my brother Mike, if you could you take Mike too, please? You see, we've never been parted so much as a day. Francis saw the sorrow on Mr. Swenson's face. Sorry, son, he said. We can only afford to take 2 children. We want a boy and a girl. I won't eat much, neither will Mike, Danny pleaded. Before Mr. Swenson, head down, turned completely away, Frances spoke up firmly. Danny, she said, we knew from the start what to expect. Mind your manners now. Speak up smartly and thank Mr. and Mrs. Swenson for offering to give you a good home. You too, Peg. Frankie's right, Mike spoke brusquely, almost angrily. Get on with it, Danny. Danny gulped and managed to whisper to Mr. Swenson, thank you, sir. Frances could see Danny was making a valiant effort, and she was proud of him. Peg solemnly reached for Danny's hand and climbed from her chair. Andrew motioned to some chairs on the side of the room. You can sit together and get acquainted, he said to the Swensons. As the children hesitated, he added, don't worry, you'll have time to say your goodbyes to the rest of your family. You can exchange addresses before you go, so you can keep in touch with one another. Danny and Peg didn't move. They looked to Frances for help. Last night, Peg whispered, I dreamed we all lived together in the same house. Dreams don't often come true. Frances heard herself echoing Megan's words. Little one, I know this must be best for you or I wouldn't let you go. Do you understand? The corner of Peg's mouth turned down, but she nodded. Maybe someone will want Mike and me together, Danny said carefully to keep his voice low so the Swensons couldn't hear, but Frances saw the rebellious tears ready to spill from his eyes. Frances wanted to sweep the two of them into her arms and hold them tightly, but she knew they would have a good home with the Swensons, and she was glad they were together. She had to be strong, as Ma would have been. If they did, they would have spoken up by now, she said, her words making the terrible ache in her heart. You need a home, and it's my thinking that Mr. and Mrs. Swenson will give you a good one. They want to get to know you, so go with them now. Don't keep them waiting. Mrs. Swenson's eyes blurred with tears as she turned to Frances. I'm so sorry, she said. We would love to take all your family, but we're far from rich, and there's so many of you. If only we could, please believe me. Don't be sorry, ma'am, Frances said. We've known we'd be separated, but we'll see one another again, of that I'm sure. For now, each of us must go where we're wanted. That's the all of it. Thank you, Miss Swenson whispered. She held out her arms to Peg, who stepped into them, allowing herself to be lifted from the stage. Peg and Danny walked to the side of the room with the Swensons. Some of the other children had already left the stage. The older boys, near the top limit of 14, had been chosen quickly. Probably, Frances guessed, because they'd be a big help on the farm. A pleasant-faced couple, square and solid, glanced at Frances, and she eagerly sat up a little straighter, brushing Petey's blonde curls back from her forehead and smoothing his collar. They seemed to be nice people, and they were discussing Petey and her. She held her breath, but their gaze moved on to Flora in the second row. They whispered together for a moment, and then happily nodded agreement, and soon Frances saw Andrew lead them to where Flora was waiting. Flora swallowed hard, and Frances swallowed hard, but nothing would ease the painful tightness in her throat. It's all right, she told herself. There's sure to be someone else. Catherine's voice sounded close to Frances's ear, and she turned to see Catherine kneeling next to Megan, one arm around her shoulder. Do you see that couple standing back there of Andrew, smiling at you? She asked. Megan nodded silently. Frances searched them out. They were young. Even from the platform, Frances could see laugh crinkles at the corners of the woman's eyes. That was a good sign. Their names are Emma and Benjamin Browder, and they would very much want you to come live with them, Megan. Mrs. Browder called you a beautiful little girl. Megan smiled cautiously. I've always been called plain. Maybe people are kinder in the West. Catherine chuckled. You're a lovely young lady. You just haven't noticed. In any case, the Browders arrived in town to get supplies, heard about the orphan train, and came to the meeting. As soon as they saw you, they wanted you. Catherine paused. I know them well. They'll love you, and you'll love them. Frances leaned back in her chair, relieved. If Catherine spoke for them, they must be good people. Do they live near here? Megan asked, her eyes wide with hope. That's a problem, Catherine said. They live many miles west of here in Kansas Territory. It would mean you'd be far from your brothers and sisters. You might see some of your family once a year or so, when the Browders came to St. Joe for supplies, and to bring you with them. You have a choice, Megan. You can go with the Browders or wait to see if another couple asks for you. Megan climbed stiffly from her chair, her face paler than before. She turned to Frances and whispered, What can I hope for? I've always been a bad luck penny. No, you're not, Frances insisted, but Megan had taken Catherine's hand. I'll go with them, she said. The Browders hurried to the platform, and Catherine introduced them to Megan. Mrs. Browder laughed with delight. There's so much I want to learn about you, she said to Megan. Do you like books? Do you like to read? Megan blushed and glanced once more at Frances. I'm not much at reading, ma'am, she said hesitantly. Frances ached for her sister. She knew how hard it would be for Megan to tell her new parents that she had always busied herself with chores, never learning to read. But Mrs. Browder reached up and pulled Megan into a hug. If you can't read, I'll teach you, she said. You'll learn to love books as much as I do. Megan's courage seemed to disturb her. Frankie, she whispered, turning toward her sister. Frances couldn't speak. She knew she should give strength to Megan, but her throat was choked with tears, and she helplessly shook her head. There'll be time for goodbyes later, Catherine said. Megan, let's find a spot for you and the Browders to talk to one another. She pointed. Look back here. I see some empty chairs. Megan, her face tight with misery, walked hand in hand with Mrs. Browder to the back of the room. Frances was glad for Megan's sake. She could tell that the Browders were kind people. Mrs. Browder looked at Megan as though she were a wonderful Christmas gift, and so Megan would have a good home. In spite of herself, Frances felt her eyes fill with tears. How could she bear to part from her shy, loving sister, who had always been her best friend? Many of the children had already left the platform when little Clara, her chin jutted out in determination, climbed down from her chair and marched to the front of the platform. To Frances' surprise, Clara faced the audience and shouted at the top of her lungs, Doesn't anyone want to adopt me? A red-cheeked woman as round as an apple called, Oh, I do! Oh, dear little lip-chin, I do! And raced toward the platform, clutching her shawl around her with one hand and tugging her surprised husband behind her with the other. She enfolded Clara with such enthusiasm that all Frances could see of Clara, as she was carried away, was her wobbling hair bow and her high-buttoned boots. Frances glanced to one side and felt her cheeks grow warm. She, Petey, and Mike were the only children left in the front row. Very few children were left in the second row. What would happen if they weren't chosen? Would they have to go back? Back to who? A mother who didn't want them? The sudden sharp memory of the judge telling Mike he'd have to go to Tombs prison if he returned to New York City made her gasp aloud. Someone had to take Mike. There was a slight commotion near the double doors as a rotund family, mother, father, and son, pushed their way into the room. The son was scowling as they entered. The man's expression as he looked up at the platform became a matching scowl. I told you to hurry or you'd be late, he said loudly to his wife. Look, all the older, stronger boys have already been chosen. Frances shivered, wishing these awful people would turn and leave. She didn't like them. Andrew suddenly spoke to Frances. She swung to see a tall, pleasant-faced couple standing beside him. Frankie, he said, I'd like you to meet Jake and Margaret Cummings. They'd like you to come and live with them. Frances's arms tightened around Petey, and she gulped back disappointment and frustration. Here at last were people who wanted her, and she had to turn them down. Her throat was suddenly so dry and tight it hurt to speak. Thank you, she whispered to the Cummingses, but I can't accept your kindness. I must stay with my little brother. Mrs. Cummings smiled and took a step forward. We didn't make it clear. We want both of you. Little Peter, too. Petey squirmed, trying to break Frances's strong grip. My name's Petey, he said. We live close to the Missouri border in Kansas Territory, not far from St. Joe. Mr. Cummings said. He added to Petey, we have a farm with cows and horses. Petey pushed himself upright, nearly falling off Frances's lap. Horses to ride? He asked. That's right. With a frantic wiggle, Petey managed to jump from Frances's lap. He took Mr. Cummings' hand. would like to ride a horse, he said. Then you shall, Mr. Cummings answered. Mrs. Cummings smiled at Francis. I'm afraid my husband wants the two of you to come with us so much. He's not above using a little bit of bribery. Please, Frankie, will you come with us? Yes, Francis answered quietly. Mike, she thought, what would I do about Mike? But she had Petey to think of too. Thank you, she remembered to tell the Cummings. Then suppose we find a spot to talk together, Andrew began. He was interrupted by a family who had arrived late. The man slapped a pudgy hand on Andrew's shoulder, forcibly turning him. That boy, he said, pointing to Mike. We want to take him. Francis, who had jumped from the platform, whirled to look at Mike. He was the only child left of those who had come on the orphan train. His face was red with embarrassment. Francis knew he was holding back tears with great difficulty. Her heart breaking, Francis took a step toward Mike, but the fat woman pushed between them. Francis saw a frown draw Andrew's eyebrows together. Mr. and Mrs. Friedrich, he said, you understand that these children are to be treated like family members. They are not to be used as hired hands. Of course, Mrs. Friedrich said. He'll be another son to us. We'll give the boy good food. She smiled and glanced quickly at her husband. The boy needs only some good food to make him grow tall and strong. Our own son works beside me on the farm. I'll ask no more of this boy than my own son. It makes no matter. We've been approved by the committee. Mr. Friedrich stated, as though that should settle it. He asked Mike, what's your name, boy? Michael Kelly, sir, Mike said. Mr. Friedrich turned to her. Where are the papers we have to sign? It's almost a 2-hour ride back to the farm. We don't want to waste any time. But Andrew looked carefully at Mike. Do you want to go with them, Mike? He said. It's your choice. Francis listened for his answer as intently as Andrew did. Mike looked down at the otherwise empty platform, and Francis could see he was trying to put on a brave face. Seems to be my only choice, Mr. McNary said. I'm game for it. Frankie, are you coming? Mrs. Cummings put a hand on Francis's shoulder, urging her toward where Mr. Cummings and Petey were waiting. Yes, ma'am, just a minute, please, she said. She squeezed past Mrs. Friedrich to reach Mike and hugged him. Go with them only if you really want to, she whispered. Couldn't be as bad as if I'm sent back, he mumbled against her ear. They don't seem like very kind people. Haven't you ever known me not to be able to hold my own? He pulled away, squared his shoulders, and attempted to smile. You can say goodbye later, Andrew reminded them, so Francis reluctantly let go of her brother's hand and followed Mr. Cummings. All of us have homes, just as Ma wanted, Francis thought, but she gave a glance back at Mike, hoping his new family would turn out to be better people than she guessed they would be. The next few minutes were a blur of new faces, voices, and papers to sign, and when Catherine and Andrew came to stand in front of Francis, Catherine and I will stop by the Cummings farm in a few days, Andrew told her. Some small tools Jake ordered haven't come in. They're due on the next steamboat from St. Louis. Catherine interrupted. We'll deliver them ourselves. It'll be a good excuse for a visit. I'll be so glad to see you, Francis blurted out to Andrew before she thought. She tried hard not to blush with her eagerness. And so will we, Margaret Cummings said, and explained to Francis we're all very good friends. Catherine gave Francis a full sheet of paper. I wrote down your brothers' and sisters' addresses, and I've given them yours. You can keep in touch with them by letter the next time you meet. She held out a hand to Francis. Mr. Friedrich's eager to get back to the farm, so now would be a good time for you children to say goodbye to one another. Peg dashed toward her, and Francis dropped to her knees to throw her arms around her littlest sister. I want you to come too, Peg cried. I can't, love, Francis whispered against her hair. You'll have Danny. The two of you will be together. Danny squeezed them both so tightly it was painful. I know how much you're hurting inside, Francis told him, and I'm proud of you, Danny. Danny's body shook with a long, deep shudder, and she could tell he was fighting back tears. Megan ran to them, wrapped her arms around Francis's neck. I'll miss you so terribly much, she cried as she clung to Francis. I'll be all alone. No, you won't, Francis muttered. You're going to have fine people you're going with. They'll take care of you, and you won't be alone. But I won't be with you. Oh, Megan, Francis cried. She shut her eyes against the burning pain of tears she refused to shed. Write to me. I'll write to you. I can't write, Megan wailed. Francis quickly soothed her. You're going to learn. Now you have a reason to learn. Your new mother will help you, and until you do, she'll read my letters to you. And Megan burst out, I don't want a new mother. Oh, Francis, can't we go home? Her words were a slap that shook sensibility back into Francis. She straightened. No, she said. Face the truth, Megan, we can't. Megan stopped crying and blinked at Francis, who sounded so bitter she startled herself. Megan, Francis said more softly, Megan, you know I meant. But Mike rushed to hug them, and Francis could feel the sobs that shook his body. Peg began to whimper, and Petey wailed. Danny clung to Mike and said, What will I do without you, Mike? Mike just shook his head, snuffling and trying to smile at Danny. You'll do just fine, my lad, he said, better than ever without me. Danny shook his head as though he didn't believe those words any more than Mike did. What about you, Mike? How will things work out for you? He glanced suspiciously at the Friedrichs, and Francis knew she wasn't the only one who was concerned about what kind of home they'd make for Mike. Have you ever known me to be down and out? Mike retorted. He gave Danny a playful shove. But Danny didn't return it. Mike, he murmured, as tears rushed from his eyes, I'll never be the same without you nearby. With a cry, Mike dove into Danny, burying his head on Danny's shoulders, and Francis reached over to him and folded her brothers. Suddenly, Francis felt a hand on her shoulder, and Andrew said, It's time to go now. Megan and Peg only squeezed more tightly, and Francis struggled to break free and get to her feet. She wiped her eyes on the back of one hand and gave a loud sniffle. Mr. McNair's right, she said firmly. We've had our chance to say goodbye, and now we mustn't keep our new families waiting any longer. Frankie, Megan whispered. Goodbye, sister. Frances gave her one last kiss and a tentative smile. I don't know when we'll be together again, but I'll write to you, and often. Megan subdued, allowed herself to go with the Browders. Mrs. Browder's own eyes were red as she took Megan's hand. The Swensons gathered up Danny and Peg, and the last tearful murmured, I'm sorry for Mrs. Swenson to Frances. They hurried from the room. Be quick about you, Michael, Mr. Friedrich said. You should be a man, not waste time with foolish tears. Mike shivered, and Frances reached to rest her hands on his shoulders. She looked toward the Friedrichs. If you ever need me, Michael Patrick, I'll come. I won't be far away. Michael stood as tall as he could and tried to smile. I'll make do, he told her. Nothing's going to get the best of me. I'm starting a new life in the West, with a new family. He paused and for an instant regained his cocky grin and said, Shouldn't you now be saying Frankie Kelly? And that's the all of it? Be off of you, Mike, she said, and answering his smile and trying hard to keep the tears from returning. She felt a strong hand take her own, and she looked up to meet Jake Cummings' warm eyes. Petey, held high in his arms, looked at Frances for reassurance. Ready, Jake said. We've got a long ride ahead of us. I'm ready, Frances was determined, but part of her trembled because the words were nothing more than a brave lie.